Welcome. As I've mentioned in a prior video and on my website, I'm currently between bikes. And yep, I sold the RadRover recently, which is a hub bike or a hub drive bike, I guess I should say. And that obviously means I'm in the market for a new, different bike. And the problem that I'm facing is, well, which one? Because there are so many of them. And which drive to get? The RadRover was, or is, a hub drive. And obviously there's the mid-drive version. And so I'm kind of going back and forth on that. And I've been doing a lot of research about the pros and cons, one over the other. And so what I want to do today is kind of share what my research has come up with and share that with you. So I am by no means an expert. Like I said, I've just been doing some research. And I'm kind of going from there. I think I've shared in the past that a couple of years ago we were in Europe and we're traveling around and saw a lot of people with e-bikes, and that kind of fueled my interest. And I decided I wanted one. And at that point, I knew nothing about e-bikes. But fortunately for us, the Rad Power Bikes is nearby in Seattle, and we decided to go over there and try them out. Now, just a little aside here, I just wanted to look. It wasn't until my wife got on the Rad City and hit the throttle and I could hear her whooping as she pulled away from me. And we bought them right then and there. And as I say, I knew nothing about hub drive versus mid drive. We just went with them because they were fun. Now, I'm going to talk about the pros and cons, and I hope you'll forgive me. I've got them kind of posted on the screen in front of me, so I'm going to be looking away down at them and trying so I don't miss any points that I've come up with. And so hopefully you're a little bit better informed about the difference between them than I. But if you know, but there are so many things to contemplate. So two different types of motors: hub drives, mid drives, and frankly, you're more likely to come across hub drives than you are mid drives, and the reason behind that is, frankly, cost. The hub drives are so much more prevalent. They're easier to build. I've seen videos where you see these workers in China just going to town, wrapping the coils and everything. It's like there's not much to it. And if you're looking for a moderately priced or cheap priced bike, you're more than likely going to be looking at a hub motor. And as I said, they're really, really popular. Now, mid-drive bikes are becoming much more common and favored in many instances, particularly as the price point goes up. So let's dive into this a little bit more. The differences between them. One, well, motor position. The hub motor is located typically in the rear wheel. Sometimes you'll see them in the front, but typically they're in the back. And what this means is, well, that's a lot of weight back there. And if you take a look at them, you'll notice that that hub takes up, what, a third of the wheel? You can see that thing is massive back there. And So the weight distribution is unbalanced. There obviously is all to the back of the bike in the in that rear wheel, and that can affect the handling of the bike. Again, this is going to depend on the person, particularly if you're kind of a newbie, if you haven't ridden bikes a lot in the past, and this is something you might find that this is a little bit of a problem, for lack of a better term. Now, the mid-drive, just like it sounds, it's in the middle of the bike, and it's right down there by the pedals, by the crank, and so it's more centrally located. Evens out the distribution of the weight from front to back. It's lower down. It's also, in my opinion, I've done measure them, I don't have them, but they look like they're smaller, particularly the new Bosch motors. You hardly even notice they're there. So there's that. And so the mid-drive is going to ride a little more like a traditional bicycle, and because you're not being pushed by a motor. Performance, second category, performance. Hub motors, typically, all things being equal, they're going to lag in the performance areas, particularly climbing hills. Thing that you have to understand is that the hub motor that's the power, that's everything pushing you, and you have no gearing back there at all. So it doesn't have the torque that a typical, comparable mid-drive would have. So it's spinning the rear wheel. You're not using the gears back there until, of course, you start pedaling. And the problem here is that this could lead, and I have read from people and heard from people that have used the hub drive to climb hills extensively, that it starts to overheat, and obviously that can lead to failure. Now, I've not experienced this myself. I'm just kind of going with what I've researched. The mid-drive, on the other hand, is a much more efficient hill climber. That's because the mid-drive motor, and I'm reading my notes here, drives the power to the crank rather than the wheel. And that crank actually is able to amplify, if you will, the amount of power. And it takes advantage of the bike's gearing. It also really means at the top end, it's really going to crank out a lot of extra torque, I guess, as well. So that's a benefit as well. Maintenance. One of the things that I've personally noticed, and a lot of people complain about when they're looking at RadRovers, to use as an example, with the hub motor, is the hassle that you go through when you're even having to do the smallest thing, like changing a tire. I've had to do it a couple of times, and I really have to admit that I didn't like the experience much. So there's that, and so there is an advantage, though, that that it does require less maintenance than the mid-drive motors because of the simplicity of it. So there's a little bit of a trade-off. The mid-drive, while it is a little more complex and it may require a little more maintenance, it's also much easier. It has essentially two bolts that hold it into the frame. You just undo those bolts, the motor drops out, for lack of a better term, and you take care of it. Excuse me. Which one? I honestly am still up in the air. I know that some of the bikes, several of the bikes I'm looking at, are mid-drive, have a mid-drive motor. So that doesn't mean I'm ruling out the hub drive, but I'm attracted. I'm being pulled in the mid-drive direction, which kind of leads me up to this next part. What experiences have you had with one or the other? Now, I will admit that one of the things, before I end this, one of the things I have mixed emotions about is typically mid-drives. I haven't researched every one of them yet, but typically mid-drives don't have a throttle. And that's something I've kind of gotten used to with the RadRover. Although I have read, because the mid-drives typically have three methods of measuring, sensors. They typically have a cadence sensor, which is all that the RadRovers have, the Rads have, and it has an effort sensor, and a third one which escapes me right now. So it really it senses things in a different way and reacts much more quickly than the cadence sensors alone, as on the Rad bikes. So anyway, getting back to what I was going to say, I'd love for you to enter into the conversation here. What are your experiences with, particularly if you've used both? That's what I'm looking for here. So thanks for stopping by. We appreciate you stopping by, and we'll see you in the next one, whatever it might be.